Hi, everyone. My name is Tessa Bentul, and I'm joined by my investigative producer, Kathy Gazza. We're here to talk about our story that we are doing today and tomorrow. It's called A Critical Call, Who Responds to a Mental Health Crisis? So the basis of the story is, and Kathy, jump in whenever you want, is that we talked to a woman, Charleen Hunter, who lives out in Stillwater. And she says that the police in Stillwater did not handle her mental health crisis correctly, basically. And you can see in the video, it's very long, very hard to watch body cam footage of the police going there, and they just didn't handle it correctly. She told them that she didn't want to go with them. She was forced to go to the hospital to check on her medication. And it ended up being that they took her and pushed her down, tased her, kind of forced her to finally say, okay, yes, you have to come with us here.
As you said, Tessa, it's very difficult to watch this video, but I think it's really important to make the point that while Charleen feels, and perhaps rightly so, that this situation wasn't handled as well as it could have been, there's an important point here, and I think it's one that we uncover with this story, which is, should police officers really be the ones to respond to these types of calls? Training is a big question here. Experience is a big question here. I think we've learned through this whole process that when it comes to responding to a mental health crisis, sometimes the folks in uniform with badges and guns tends to exacerbate a problem, a high stress situation. There's already a lot going on there for the person who's involved with this. And then to see someone in uniform show up, it can be a bit intimidating. Now, again, we have to point out that the main job of police officers and sheriff's deputies is public safety. That's what they're trained to do. They often become the de facto first responders to these calls. But the question that we're really looking at in this piece is, should they be? Are there not mental health behavior specialists who should be doing this? Counselors, social workers. And we're also going to take a look at some places that are going about this in a different fashion and seem to have had some success with this.
And that's the part I want to touch on too, is that there are so many police departments, as we learned in our stories, that have implemented, either hiring on someone who knows how to work with people who are dealing with a mental health crisis, either because they have gone through that themselves, or it's something that they have studied and worked on, or a lot of these officers will go through that type of training, or there's a new program that's going with police to these mental health crises, responding to it. And some departments are doing it, some others can't do it just yet because of money, or they just haven't gotten there yet. And it's a step that they want to take in that direction. But it's not just happening here or to that woman that we see in the video. It's happening all across this country. And it still seems to be an issue that a lot of departments are trying to figure out and piece together and how they can do this.
Yeah, one of the people that we talked to in the course of these interviews was a woman from the Vera Social Justice Institute in New York, and they've done quite extensive studies on this. And what they have found is that oftentimes the biggest champion for changing the way this system works are the men and women in uniform. They understand that their experience and their training only goes so far in handling these cases, and that it makes a lot more sense to have someone who looks like the person, who sounds like the person, who understands the person responding to these cases. They don't, they have no territorial claim on these calls. They just happen to be the de facto first responders. And there are a lot of programs that we've looked at, including one in Eugene, Oregon, and one in Denver, Colorado, where the mental health specialists are the ones responding. EMS and EMTs respond. And it's a more effective way to deal with someone in a mental health crisis, apparently. And it also frees up law enforcement to do the job that they're trained to do, the priority, which is responding to calls that are of a criminal nature, keeping the peace, as we say. It seems to work. And again, as you alluded to, Tessa, there are many more communities that would like to try this, but it's always about funding. And it's also, as we talked to Albany County Sheriff Craig Apple about this, who has launched a pilot program in his patrol zones. But it's also a matter of finding the social workers, the personnel who are capable of handling these kinds of calls. So there are some impediments, there are some roadblocks, but I think time and again, we've seen that there are other ways to handle these calls that may just be more beneficial for everyone involved.
Yeah. And I think Charlene understands that too, that she knows that there's some roadblocks to even find people who want to do this job, because it's a pretty tough job that you're walking into. This is not just any police response call. These are people that they're in their own mindset sometimes. They can't understand what is going on around them. And like you said, that when you see an officer in uniform, it's very intimidating. And I think for Charlene, she mentioned to us that she really wants to be part of that change. And you can see it, you can feel it when we talk to her. She, what I really loved about her is that she is the one who shared that body cam footage with us. She knows that this is to someone else. This is embarrassing. She's very vulnerable in that state. And she knows that, but she said, I don't care. People need to see why the system needs to change, and I want to be part of that change, whether it's sharing my story or being the one that goes on these calls with people. That's eventually what I want to do here. And she is the first step to that change here, and we really have to give her a lot of credit for just being so honest with us.
Yeah, her transparency really was impressive. We weren't really sure initially how we were going to handle this story. We weren't sure that she was going to come across as just being anti-police and very angry, and she is not at all. In fact, at one point I don't want to give away too much of our story, but at one point in our story, she actually apologizes for her behavior. She's really sorry. She said time and again, I am so sorry for what I did. But she also said, I wasn't in the wrong. This was me in a different state, in a different place. And she really had no comprehension of what was going on at the time. So she's sorry for her
Mhm.
behavior, but she also recognizes that something in the system needs to change.
Yeah, for sure. And we also hear, when you see her in this video, you see a very different person than the woman she was in that video a year ago. And we spoke to her husband too, a very loving, very supportive husband. And he gives a lot of good insight too, as someone who grew up with family members that have a similar problem, as well as his wife, who he stands by her no matter what. He's got really good insight there.
And it's interesting because he has such a protective instinct toward his wife, and he also feels a bit guilty about having the police actually arrive and take this call, because he knows it's not ideal, but yet he's in a position where he's run out of options and ideas for how to
Yeah.
handle her, and
There's only so much he can do.
correct. He knows that's extreme, but they both together have said repeatedly they're willing to get out there and work toward change. They're not complaining and whining about a situation. They're saying this is wrong and we want to be part of the change. We want to be part of the solution.
So tonight you can hear Charlene's story starting at 5 o'clock tonight, November 9th, which is a Wednesday. And then tomorrow you're going to hear all the other states and programs that are kind of implementing these mental health crisis response programs here in Albany County, and even all the way to the west coast of the United States. That's tomorrow starting at 5 o'clock, November 10th, which is a Thursday. And if you aren't able to catch them on air, you can always catch them online at WNYT.com. Kathy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Tessa. It's a pleasure. And I hope I hope we can help be part of the solution as well. I think it's an important story, and I think there are a lot of folks who will be surprised by what they see, and maybe give them some hope that there might be another way to handle these kinds of situations.
Exactly.